Welcome back to the second hour. In the first hour, we covered an introduction to the CPO course, LAPSON, and the IFPO. We did an overview of the course materials, as well as an overview of the curriculum review team. As I said in the first hour, we'll dig deeper into our lesson plans and the course materials as we get especially into the third hour. One thing that I want to stress to you is the importance of you becoming a CPO instructor. So joining me for this portion of the recording is Dr. Tom Washburn from LAPSON, and he's going to discuss the process that you'll have to undergo in order to be a CPOI in order to teach this course. Dr. Washburn, take it away.
Thanks, Kevin. I just want to let you guys know that we're excited to have Kevin as part of our team. He's brings tremendous industry background and knowledge for us to share. And while on that, I want to remind y'all that, the N in LAPSON is network. We are part of your network. Kevin's part of your network. You can reach out to him. He'll be sharing his email address today. You can always reach out to Kevin Matthews there in North Carolina, Josh Clark there in North Carolina. That's what the network's all about, is being able to support you and encourage you and give you the materials you can have to be successful. So today we need to spend a little bit of time though talking about some of the technical issues that you need to be considering as far as becoming certified to certify your students. So first of all, it is required that you have CPO. There's two ways to do that, and you have 1 year. Sandy Davies over at IFPO, she's awesome, huge industry supporter of LAPSON and your programs. Sandy is just great, and she's been working with us to bring prices way down for y'all to make it affordable. She's been working on trying to get y'all copies of the book at a good price, things like that. So we're working with Sandy all over the place trying to get the best product to you guys. But in order for you to certify your students, and I know some of y'all have been teaching already, this process will be easy for you because you've already been teaching. But you do need to finish up this part of the process if you have not. So everyone teaching that is planning on testing their students would want them to be able to get their CPO. You have to be CPO certified yourself. Now there's two ways to do this. If you, they'll jump down to the bottom, you can get a waiver. If you have existing certification in your state, in North Carolina or any other state, Sandy will take a look at that. Or if you have 3 years experience or greater in law enforcement, security, or military. Now you will need to write a justification explaining why you, because let's say if you got 3 years in security, that's easy because you're probably already state certified. But if you're like me, I had 5 years as an SRO, a couple years in law enforcement. I never really did anything in protective services. So honestly, I would prefer to go ahead and get certified the normal way so that I can learn the material better. But if you do have specific experience and you feel like you're capable of being waived, that's completely okay. Also, if you're one of the teachers that's been teaching CPO, I know like Kevin Matthews has been teaching it for a number of years. In fact, this year, 100% of his kids passed CPO. Congratulations, Kevin Matthews, on that. Kevin's a good candidate for being waived. So if you have an industry background, if you have a state certification, or if you have a reason because of your military experience or law enforcement experience to be waived, you can apply. All you need to do is just shoot me an email at info@lapson.org, and I will just give me a detail. The best thing is a copy of your certification if you've got your state certification, any kind of supporting documents, and then just briefly explain why you think you should be waived. I'll forward those to Sandy. Sandy ultimately makes those decisions because that's, IFPO, and they'll come back. Now, if you're like me, even though I have some law enforcement experience, I personally would prefer to get trained so that I can be the best teacher for my kids, and my school would pay for it, is I would go ahead and take the CPO class online. It's $300 for LAPSON members. I think it's like $450, but y'all are all LAPSON members because you're North Carolina. If you want to study it on your own, get a copy of the book. I think some of y'all already have them at your school or have your school buy one. Prepare yourself. You were going to be giving you all the PowerPoint materials in your IP42 instructional materials. If you want to go ahead and take the test yourself and pay $100 to be CPO certified that way, that's fine. That's up to you. but you do need to be CPO certified within a year. So you can go ahead this fall and start teaching your students IP42 and preparing them to take the test either fall or spring. And they can go ahead and test and they will go ahead and be certified, but you have 1 full year through next summer to complete a CPO and CPOI process. So to get the initial CPO, this is step 1. Again, I would encourage you to go through the online course if your school will pay for that. I know that takes a little bit more time, but personally, I'd want to be better prepared to teach it. I did not do a lot of protective services. I had a couple of side gigs, working in CPO. I mean, not CPO, but in retail security. I also worked as a escort protection. Actually, I had a great time working for the Braves, but I don't know really a lot of managerial concepts, legal concepts. So for me personally, I would recommend taking the online course. You got the experience though, send me the information at info@lapson.org. We'll see if Sandy will go ahead and waive that. All right. Now, once you're past CPO, everyone has to get CPOI. So regardless of what your background or lack thereof, once we have the CPO hurdle cleared, you do, and again, this is all within the 1 year period. It's a 10-hour course. We will be offering it definitely at our national conference in Georgia in February. Maybe that's a good reason for you to justify coming down to Atlanta and seeing us. It's going to be a great conference on top of that. I can only imagine we're going to be doing some online versions of this because of just the nature of COVID still kind of hanging around. It gives you all the materials you need, get you directed at, directs you to all the materials that we're already providing you guys. And it's $150. If you do both, it's $425, I think, for the CPO and the CPOI course. So if you want to sign up for both. Now, we don't have signups available just yet. So, but by the time school starts back in August, we should have the website updated with all this material for you to be able to sign up, and we'll have some training dates set up. In fact, one of our primary trainers is going to be Kevin Sparks that you've been working with today. Also, Kevin Matthews is, and maybe Josh Clark might be some of the other ones we use. If you've got extensive security background and you'd like to be considered to be an instructor for the online CPOI, reach out to me and I'll connect you with Kevin. Kevin Sparks, that is, going to be coordinating all this training and staffing the training. This is about to go full nationwide. So we're definitely going to be in the lookout for some additional instructors for the material. And it is a compensated thing if you're interested. So step 1, you can get CPO, whether that's through a waiver, taking the test, or going through the course online through IFPO. And once you clear that hurdle, you will need to get CPOI certified, which again, as I mentioned, we're going to offer this a couple of times. You guys have a full year. You have until August 2022 to get all that in place. If you don't start teaching IFPO materials, let's say you're not doing IP42 until spring, well, then that means you would have until, I guess, January 2023. I, though, would recommend getting it done right away. Like I said earlier, I would want to have that, at least the CPO in place before I went in. I don't want to try to fake it till I make it. I'd like to get some basic instruction. So hope you guys are excited about where North Carolina's going with IP42. We will be realigning the curriculum. Your curriculum hasn't changed since a number of years back, but this year there's going to be some realignments. We already got the curriculum and the material out there for you. We got to go back and realign your state standards. But this is the IP42 course you're expected to teach. And hopefully your system will support your students getting CPO certified, because it's a great entry-level job opportunity for these kids at 18. Here in Atlanta, as you guys know, I live down in Atlanta. CPO all day long, they're picking up kids at 18 years old, starting at 14, 16, 18 an hour, all day long. So, our kids can get good jobs. In fact, I was talking to a student of mine, former student of mine, who is a security guard for his college. He's not on the police force. He's the guy that sits at the gate and, checks parking passes and stuff. And he's on a work program through college. It's paying $20 an hour because it's applied to his tuition expenses. And basically he's going to college practically for free and making a little money on the side. So you just don't know where these certifications are going to lead for your kids. So I encourage you to look more into it, to participate, get your certifications in place. And like I said, by August 1, we should have that on the website completely. We've been really busy this summer preparing for y'all's conferences, as well as conferences in 7 other states. So look, about August 1, we'll have all that information about signing up. If you want to go ahead and send me your information about getting waived, that's okay, but just be aware maybe a couple of weeks delayed. We've got a bunch of projects we're wrapping up right now, helping you guys out. So we appreciate Kevin coming in today and doing these sessions for us. We appreciate the work he's done and the leadership he's provided in this process. And I'm going to pass the baton back to Kevin at this point.
All right, thanks, Tom. One thing that I wanted to kind of piggyback on what Tom was saying is if you decide you want to go directly to the IFPO rather than going to through lapsing, there's going to be extra requirements and extra cost that the IFPO has been gracious enough to waive as part of the agreement between the IFPO and lapsing. So I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that, because if you're like me, I'm always looking for more bang for the buck personally. And so, you know, any chance I get to save a little bit of money, even though it's may sometimes be the school district's money, I still try to be a good steward of other people's money as well. One thing that I'd also like to mention about this program is that when we got together and we developed this IP42 program, we wanted to make sure that the program was flexible and one that you can adapt. You can move units or chapters around in the textbook. You'll also be able to utilize some of the assessment projects that we have designed, or you can simply, you know, be innovative, be creative, and come up with your own. So, as we said in the first hour, our two objectives were to enable our students to understand the course materials, to be able to pass the course, to obtain the certification, and like Tom said, and like we said in the first hour, most importantly, we want our students to be career ready. So now we're going to examine the lesson plans and the essential questions, the main and supporting standards. We'll also look at the learning targets, the use of vocabulary sheets, how to assess your students to ensure they're understanding the course information. We want you to make sure that you understand how to find the links to all this information on the Lapson website so that you can locate additional lesson plans and resources. We're going to discuss some student mini projects that you can have students complete along with some optional student portfolios. For each unit of the course, the lesson plan contains some student-friendly learning targets. These learning targets will allow you to see how the students are retaining the information. These learning targets may have the students defining certain key terms or explaining to you a certain word or even a process, like what is a risk assessment or what is crime prevention through environmental design or SEPTED. The learning target may also ask the student to identify that process. So the essential question in each unit allows us to share a question that we want each student to be able to identify and to remember for several years to come. An example of one of our essential questions is taken from Unit 2 on communications. What is that essential question? It's pretty simple, but it's also can be complex. What is effective communications? That's something that we should be able to do on a day-to-day basis, not only communicating to our students, but to our coworkers, our friends, and our family. But sometimes we have to understand ourselves how to relay that information. And then we need to understand that the person that we're trying to relay that information to is able to understand it and maybe even give you some feedback on it. So here's some learning topics that we took from from one of our lessons in unit number 1. I can explain risk management. I can define assets, risk avoidance, risk mitigation, and risk transfer. We talked about assets in the first session. What are the assets that we're looking to protect? Again, people, property, and information. We all on a day-to-day basis have some type of risk avoidance. Doesn't matter if you live in a big city like Tom does in Atlanta. Sometimes his risk avoidance may be, I'm not going to travel down a certain road at a certain time because I know that traffic's going to be heavy. I know that, this facility sporting event may be letting out at that time, or people may be going to that facility for a sporting event. So he's going to avoid that risk altogether. Maybe he's going to do risk mitigation. What steps can he put into place to mitigate some type of loss due to whatever risk they may be faced with? Could it be severe weather like a hurricane or a tornado? Could it be a fire, a forest fire, for an example? These are different things. What steps are you taking to mitigate that risk? And then, of course, there's risk transfer. What do we mean when we're talking about risk transfer? Pretty simple. We're transferring that over. That's why we purchase insurance. We're transferring the risk over to the insurance company by us paying our insurance premiums on a monthly basis. So if we have that automobile accident, we're not coming out of pocket with a large amount of money. Hopefully, we're just going to pay our deductible and get our automobile fixed, and we'll be able to move on. The third thing that I wanted to point out here in this learning topic is I can identify Peel's principles of policing. Now, I'm sure that you cover the 9 principles of policing that Sir Robert Peel wrote back in 1829 in your IP41 course. I cover it in my intro to law and public safety course here in Georgia, and I'm sure that you do the same thing. One thing that I'm always amazed at, and it kind of gets the students into a conversation, is as we go through the 9 principles of policing, they're able to say, Mr. Sparks, it's kind of odd how this information was prepared back in 1829, and here we are in 2021, and we see a lot of the same things. So it's amazing to them, and I'm still kind of perplexed at times myself, how something that was written, a long time ago still plays into what we do on a daily basis. So some of these may also be key words that were selected as part of the vocabulary words in this unit. What is the importance of the vocabulary words? Well, it's basically to help the student better define and understand keywords that are used throughout the chapter. So here's some examples of some key vocabulary words from chapter 1. We have asset valuation, asset, risk, asset protection, layered protection, SEPTED, wake-up theory, risk avoidance, risk mitigation, risk transfer, risk management, and patrols. Now, you notice that some of those we just previously discussed. So again, these are important parts of this unit. They're not only key learning targets, but they're also terms that we want to make sure that we effectively communicate to students and that they understand. So we've delivered the content to the students, and we need to know that they're retaining that information. So we assess the students' knowledge. can give them vocabulary quizzes or some type of summative assessment, multiple choice quizzes. At the end of each chapter, throughout the textbook, the professional protection officer, you'll see that there are some already published questions that you could use to assess the student's knowledge to see, are they understanding the information? We can also have the students answer certain questions that pertain to this material that we discussed during our lectures. So during our curriculum review meeting, we brainstormed some ideas for some student mini projects. Before sharing some of the ones that we came up with, we want you to take a few minutes to develop a student mini project that you think you would use to give to your students. I want you to email your ideas to me. You'll see my email address here on the screen. It's kevin.sparks@peachschools.org. So you may be saying, well, what's the purpose of that? We want to make sure you're understanding the different concepts, and we're going to discuss these as you see in the bottom bullet point there in the live session. I'm going to discuss along with my curriculum review team members the things that you came up with. So make sure you take a few minutes, develop this, take 10 minutes. Upon your completion, email it to me, and let's see what kind of good ideas you've come up with. welcome back. Some of the semester-long student mini projects that we came up with include having students complete a crime prevention through environmental design or CPTED assessment at your school. If you have virtual students, you could assign them to conduct a residential security assessment at their own home. One thing that I mentioned in the first hour is I like to use the broken windows theory to help convey the message about crime prevention through environmental design to the students, because they need to understand that CPTED deals with the built environment. So if you have areas that seem to be neglected, then a lot of times that's kind of a haven for criminals, as we know. And so we want to reduce those different possibilities. So that's important for us to do, to convey that information to the students. When you're looking through the resources later, as we go through more of the information, you'll see in section 4 that we've included a CPTED checklist that not only will assist you in explaining the CPTED process to students, but it will also allow them, when they go out to do the CPTED assessment, they can go through utilizing the checklist and they can check yes or no, or they can make any notes that they see that may be necessary. Things that a lot of people often overlook that are part of the CPTED design. Lighting along sidewalks. Some of you probably have lighting on your own campuses, or you've been to a university campus or some type of sports facility, and the sidewalk has lights along it that kind of guide you in the direction that they want you to go in, because there's obviously, as we know, there's public entrances and then there's private entrances. So we don't want the public to mistake the private entrance for a public entrance. So a lot of times it's the simple little concept that we put in place in order for them to kind of understand the direction we want them to go. What about natural surveillance? Shrubbery and bushes, for an example, or bollards in front of a business. Some of those bollards contain lights, like I was just discussing, while others do not. So there's certain things that you want to make sure that the students understand. What about conducting a school security assessment? Break some of your students up and have them go around and do a security assessment of your own school. It's like when I go out and I do a security assessment at a business, I tell them that, if somebody comes in here and says, oh, you have to do this or you have to do that, or you're not doing things right, for a lot of times they don't understand the concepts of conducting a security assessment. So in addition to the CPTED checklist, we've also provided you a checklist that you can use to do the security assessment. It will allow you, again, just like the CPTED, to convey that information to the students, but it also gives them something that they can check off yes or no, and they can make notes. Both of these checklists I personally use when I go out and do assessments at facilities. So I know that they're tried and true methods. They allow me to come back and write a prepared written report that I provide to them. So why did I say that not everything is going wrong? Well, heck, it's pretty simple. If you've got doors and windows and locks on said doors and windows, that's part of security. So obviously you're doing something right. Maybe you don't have CCTV. That's fine. Maybe you're trying to show the need and the justification. As we all know, it costs money to implement certain physical security measures or countermeasures. So we want to make sure that we can justify the expenditures that are going to come along with putting these measures and countermeasures in place. So, having the students understand these basic concepts and, having them view things from a different point of view when they walk around the school campus will allow them to kind of really understand and grasp the fundamentals of what you're attempting to effectively communicate to them. When we get to the live Q&A session, we'll discuss some of the projects that hopefully you took the time to come up with and you've emailed me. So we don't have to call anybody out in the live Q&A session to not participate. Anyway, as we all know, students love to do hands-on learning projects, okay? They seem to retain the information better, just as all of us do. So, it's important that they understand those particular things. Also, one thing that I want to mention is you can do a course-long project with the review materials that will allow the students to prepare to take the CPO course and hopefully pass the certification portion of it. So let's move on. Do some of your students use student portfolios? Well, some of us do, and some of us do not. If you're not familiar with a student portfolio, a digital portfolio is an online collection of work that represents the student's abilities and skills as a professional in the field. It's typically made up of that student's best work over a period of time, such as maybe what they did in the previous job, or things like CPO and security assessments that they're learning about while they're not only earning a high school degree or diploma, but also obtaining the CPO certification. So, in addition to digital portfolios, you can also have a hard copy. Maybe you've required the students to keep it in a 3-ring binder because you're old school. So, these are 2 options that you have: digital or a hard copy. The digital portfolios, as well as the hard copy, they can contain different types of content. For an example, photographs, text, illustrations, spreadsheets. If you're doing digital, you could put web material in there. You could do it for a digital portfolio, but it's just going to create a little bit more work for the student. So if you utilize the digital platform, having this content all in one place online makes it easier for the students to access. It makes it easier for you to access their work, and it makes it easier for them to share the work. So there's a link here on the slide so that you can find more information about doing portfolios. When you have time, take a look at it, and if it's something that you're not doing, it may be something worth incorporating into your curriculum. So let's move on to pedagogy. What is it, and how did we incorporate it during this project? So pedagogy is the study of how knowledge and skills are imparted in an educational context. It reflects different social, political, and cultural contexts. It's commonly referred to as the approach to teaching. We went with the backward design with pedagogy. So how did we accomplish that? Well, we identified what we wanted the students to know and to be able to understand and, demonstrate by the end of the learning cycle. We design the lessons around the assessment and with the learning target in mind. So if students don't see the relevance in what we're teaching, just like our own kids, for those of us that are parents, they'll turn a deaf ear to us. We want to create an assessment to measure how the student is learning. It doesn't always have to be a written assessment. Sometimes we can accomplish this through project-based learning. So as you see here, standard course planning, we start with choosing a textbook, writing a syllabus, writing and revising lectures, preparing PowerPoints, writing exams or problem sets, and we ensure that things are instructor centered. When we're looking at the backward design, we formulate the broad set of learning goals. We set specific learning objectives that we want the student to be able to understand, and also that we want to be able to effectively communicate. Then we want to design our assessments, both formative and summative, around whatever the lesson plan is that we're trying to teach. We want to develop the learning activities, our lectures that we provide, homework assignments that we give, and even the opportunity for the students to reflect on the information, and maybe they're providing it back to us in a where we give them teacher of the day or something, and we allow them to present material. Maybe we don't use a whole day. Maybe we say, be prepared to provide a 15-minute course of instruction on this. So we want to make sure that our system is student-centered. So we've talked about pedagogy. We've talked about the learning cycle and what we want them to do and understand. So we're assessing the students. But the question is, who's assessing us as a teacher? The answer to that is simple. It's reflective teaching. Now, like I've told y'all, I just completed my first year as an educator. And so this was another one of the concepts. I didn't have a clue what pedagogy was. I didn't have a clue what reflective teaching meant. I didn't know what IEPs were or 504s. So you might as well have been speaking to me in a foreign language, because it was something that I didn't understand. So I had to go out and understand. Like I said, for years, I've been teaching. I'm not only a field training officer and a supervisor and a law enforcement manager, but I'm also licensed in the state of Georgia as a classroom and firearms instructor through the Georgia Board of Private Detectives and Private Security, which is the regulatory agency that oversees the security industry in Georgia. So I teach in Georgia. Our officers have to go through 24 hours of unarmed basic security officer training, as well as 16 additional hours for their armed certification. When I did my master's degree, my master's thesis covered the security training for both unarmed and armed security officers across all 50 states. In 2017, when I was conducting my research, 2016, and in the early 2017, I was shocked to learn that in some states, all you had to do to be an armed security officer was to go up and go see the sheriff, and the sheriff said, okay, Bubba can be an armed security officer. To me, as an instructor and as an educator and as a corporate security manager and a law enforcement officer, I don't know about you, but that kind of frightens me. So I needed to understand what reflective teaching was. Reflective teaching involves examining somebody's, one's underlying beliefs about teaching and learning and understanding one's alignment with actual classroom practice, both before, during, and after a course is taught. It helps us to collect, record, and analyze everything that happened in the lesson. To sum it up, basically, you're the teacher or analyzing your own instructional practices. So think about it. If your students are failing your exams, we need to maybe reevaluate what we're doing, and maybe we need to find a better way to come back and present that information. It's all about effective communication. Do we ourselves understand the material, and do we understand how to present that material? Maybe we need to videotape our lectures and take a look at how we're presenting the information. Obviously, all of us, are faced with some types of classroom, disruptions. Maybe it's, a student that, has a question and you have to pause. And sometimes you probably like me, you lose your train of thought, or maybe it's you get interrupted because the main office buzzes you over the intercom and wants to ask you a question. So, being able to go back and look at how we're presenting that information can, help us to understand, the best way for us to effectively communicate what we're trying to teach the students. So, think about are there other methods that we can use to, accomplish this? I'm sure you're probably like me. My boss, my CTE director, he comes in, he sits in at sometimes at different times during my classes to observe how I'm doing as an educator. Our principal, he's subject to walk in and, want to see not only what I'm presenting, but maybe I have a guest speaker and he wants to see the information that they're presenting. I'm in a small school district, only high school in the county. I'm sure a lot of you are in a lot larger districts. We have 4 elementary schools, 2 middle schools that all feed into 1 high school. And so it's not unusual for me to look up and see the superintendent. So a lot of times the superintendent, the principal, and my boss, who is also an assistant principal, they provide feedback to me in how I'm doing as an instructor. So, that's another way that we can analyze what we're doing. So again, that's just ways that we can understand. What methods can you use to be a more reflective teacher? There's a link here on the screen. It's a link to an article. When you get time, check it out. And, that may help you out with something. And again, like I said, about the great thing about this program is it's flexible. And if you see something's not working, maybe you need to reevaluate it, readjust it a little bit. Maybe the students aren't grasping it. Hey, you may just have to discard it and try something different. What may work really well for one teacher may not work for the next teacher because, we all have students that learn at different levels, and we all possess different knowledge, skills, and abilities. And so, like Tom was saying at the very first part of this session, if you don't understand the concepts of security and protective services, and you yourself don't understand the concepts of the CPO, you need to be able to go through the course and understand. It's very important that you do that so that you effectively communicate this information to the students. reflecting helps you develop your skills and review their effectiveness rather than just carry on doing things as you've always done. Like I said, this was my first year. My first semester compared to my second semester was like a train wreck. I felt like that my second semester was a lot better than my first semester. I had a better understanding of the educational side of things at that point. I was able to, one of the analysis that I did for me personally was I gave the students an assignment and I said, hey, I want you to write a reflective paper. Tell me what you learned in the course, tell me what you liked, and tell me what you don't like. Because I want to be able to evaluate myself by utilizing feedback from the students. So, you know, that's a method that I employed that would help me to see what the students like and what they didn't like. So it's just, it's sometimes it's about questioning and questioning yourselves, but in a positive way. What you do and why you do it, and then deciding, hey, is there a better or maybe a more efficient way of doing it in the future? So in the next hour, we're going to dive deeper back into the resources and the lesson plans for lapsing. Please make sure that you've emailed me your suggestions for some mini projects. You've heard some of the ones that we as a collective curriculum review team came up with. So we want to see what your ideas are, because, you know, we may all be subject matter experts, but you may have a different concept or a different idea than something that we've already come up with. So we want to hear from you. We want to hear what you have to say. When you have time, take a look around at the lapsing website, go back to IP42. You'll see some of the resources and lesson plans. Go ahead and move to that point, because we're going to take a deep dive into that here in the third session. I hope that you've enjoyed this second session. Again, I appreciate Tom for jumping in here and assisting me with this process. So hang tight, and we'll see you over in the third session.